Hello, we are here to present the Metrics Explorer, a tool used to learn about Prometheus. I'm Brendan O'Handley, a software engineer at Grafana, and I work on the metric data sources. So this includes the Prometheus data source in Grafana. And Catherine?
Hey everyone, I'm Catherine. I'm a product designer at Grafana, also working with Brendan on the team that maintains metrics-based data sources. So today we'll be talking about something a little bit different, a user-focused case study on building the Metrics Explorer.
Cool, thank you. We're very happy to be here, and we'll talk about the background of the Metrics Explorer, why we build it, can we give users more power to explore, the learnings from user testing, and our next steps. So a little bit about the background. In 2022, Grafana set a goal to improve the getting started experience for new users. And we know historically Grafana has catered towards power users and early adopters, but we also knew that the product could be challenging for new users, especially Prometheus beginners. So we wanted to make getting started in Prometheus easier and to expand to more audiences. So we created the first cross-functional planning to have a collaboration between UX, product, and engineering. And with the spirit of collaboration guiding us, we looked at our users' workflow, identified areas of biggest impact, and Catherine and I that work on data sources, we work on parts of Grafana that involve configuring data sources and querying data. So this was a great opportunity to look into. And this research guided why we built what we built. So the research plan, it was put into place to understand how users interacted with the Prometheus data source. And we wanted to focus on Prometheus in Grafana because it's our most widely used data source. And I want to say, as an engineer, this was different than my normal work, but it was also very exciting and very eye-opening for me. What I got to see clearly the gaps that new Prometheus users have in their knowledge, and it also allowed me to come up with ideas on how to solve for their pain points. So this research included workshopping, user journey mapping, persona creation, and interviewing users. And we started with a workshop with Grafana employees. We brought together software engineers, we brought together UX researchers and product to provide feedback on the whole getting started process. Within this workshop, we came up with the ideas and we created some solutions for some of the pain points. And please don't try to read any of the sticky notes, or just make sure everybody got to participate and contributed. And from this, we started to create a user journey, and we defined the user journey in Grafana as a user having and moving through the Grafana UI with a purpose involved. And so this purpose or goal we had was running their first query. And we mapped out this user journey based on the workshop discussions, our research, and our knowledge of the product. So we wanted to use this workflow around discussion points within our user interviews. We wanted to ask where people were getting stuck, and what were the pain points in this journey. And who are the users or personas that we explored? We researched and we found there is a super user, which is usually an admin or a senior member of an organization which will configure Prometheus. They are also responsible for creating and assigning different access permissions. There is also a querying guru who may be creating dashboards or writing raw PromQL, and they are writing queries, and this is something they're familiar with. And there is the user for which we wanted to focus on, who we wanted to solve for. And this is the observer or the beginner. This is a person who may be new to the observability space. They may require some guidance or mentorship. And another interesting point is there is another user type under this persona who's not an engineer. And these users may not write queries, but instead use the dashboards to view specific metrics. They may navigate around, or they may set thresholds. With these personas in mind, we began to conduct user interviews, and we mainly focused on new users since this is who we wanted to solve for. And we asked these users how they used Prometheus in Grafana, and we asked them to show us as they navigated through the UI. So what were some of the things that we saw? What did we hear? Well, the Prometheus query editor in Grafana is very powerful, and it has some amazing features, but we did want to focus in on some of the pain points and opportunities to help people out. And we found that users found it challenging to navigate through the metric select list with tens of thousands of metrics. It was sometimes challenging getting started with a query. They didn't know what metrics existed or what metric to choose when writing a query. So we had a lot of findings from our research, we had a lot of outcomes, but we had to focus in on one of these to start working, and we chose to work on improving the metrics browsing experience. And it was at this time the feature lifecycle was moving along nicely. I coded out a prototype and began working with some of the designers to start iterating on this. With this collaboration, it's a lot of fun. We named the early project the Metric Encyclopedia as like a reference, which you could page through and look through all of that information. The designers and I, we entered this into a hackathon, and we had a lot of fun. But this wasn't all. The design got sharper and clearer, and in the spring, Catherine joined our squad full-time, and we continued to iterate on the design. We continued to do user testing, and as we rolled this feature out in the feature toggle process within Grafana, we started to get more feedback from actual users. And from this, we continued designing. We renamed the feature the Metrics Explorer. We reorganized and refined the search settings. We used the space better, and it was looking very good. But we still continued to do user testing to make sure that we were providing a solution for our new users. So here is one example of the user testing.
Okay. I mean, immediately, I guess what I'm seeing is there's 151 pages paginated. That's good information. Before, I was dragged the drop down to see how many things existed. Now, I just press this button, and I'm like, whoa. I can also, I guess, probably do what I did before, which was search for latency. Oh, I mean, I'm already getting like, yeah, there's that many latencies, there's that many durations. These are all just good, simple. I mean, I don't even have a task in mind, but if I was just looking around what metrics exist, yeah, this would be a huge help.
Cool. So what are some of the features? What's some of the code that we've implemented in this? Well, you can search for metrics by name and description. And when this can include tens of thousands of metrics, we chose to use the ufuzzy.js library to search through that. We also added a filter for Prometheus types. Metrics are displayed in a paginated list with configurable number of results. We show the metric name, type, and help description in the display, and we have an additional setting for a regex matching search. So a little deeper. Because we're dealing with tens of thousands of metrics, we chose to use the ufuzzy library, which is capable of searching through or call a haystack of hundreds of thousands of strings or phrases, and it can sort results by relevance. And so when we were searching through many, many names, and then the additional search by help description, this was very fast, very performant. In addition to this, the Prometheus types. We know that not all metrics have metadata that includes the type, and we know that some types will create other types, like histograms and counters, and we wanted to bring this to people's awareness, so we added the filter by type, and we are interested in the Prometheus work around metadata for this, as a side note. To continue on with some of the code, as we did interviews, we also did interviews with super users, with power users. And so one of the requests for that was a regex matching, and we know that Prometheus endpoints support this, so we included this within the metrics explorer. So what does all of this look like? Here is our demo.
And we can see our metrics listed by pages with type and description. The Metrics Explorer can search for metrics with a fuzzy search. So this means that we can spell our metrics closely, and if we spell them incorrectly, we can still get relevant results. Search results are also ordered based on relevance to the input. So if we search for the metric up, the first metric that we get is the metric up. Results are shown in a paginated table list here. We can see the pages, we can see the total number of metrics, and we have results per page that a user can change. A user can also filter by Prometheus type. We have a counter, gauge, histogram, summary, unknown, and no type, where the metadata is undefined. And we have no type. The Metrics Explorer also has additional settings which can broaden the search, filter results by metadata, change the UI, and change the underlying mechanism for searching to search with regex using the backend. First, a user can include description in the search. So if we look for data, we can find data in the metric name, and we can also find data in the metadata description here. Next, a user can include results with no metadata or exclude results so that all of the metrics listed have metadata. We can disable text wrap, and we can enable a regex search using this setting.
Cool. So that was our demo, and I will pass it on to Catherine. Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. Now let's talk about what's next with the Metrics Explorer. Now, the Metrics Explorer solved the initial need of having users understand their metrics, but there was an idea. Why don't we add labels and values to this feature as well? We can show all of this metrics metadata, but also allow users to be able to search and select their labels and values for their query. Now, this functionality already exists in Grafana in a feature called the metrics browser. So if someone's writing a query, they're able to kind of see all of the metrics, their labels and values, and add to it. So this is kind of what that looks like. On the left, there's a huge list of metrics here, and this is kind of just me scrolling through it, and this is kind of what it looks like when going through that. And then you have the labels and values on the right. However, we've been hearing about performance issues in the metrics browser. We've been calling the series endpoint, which calls the metrics, values, and labels at once, but for customers, that could mean a call for hundreds and millions of metrics, hundreds and thousands of values, and then all of those associated labels with those values. So you can imagine all of the performance issues that this can lead to. So what if we fix this as well? So we can call the metrics, labels, and values using different endpoints, and then we can match them with a series selector. And then that means the labels would only show if the metrics were selected, or the values would only show when the labels were selected, and this would be much more performant. So we wanted to kind of tackle these two birds with one stone, kind of adding those labels and values, and then also kind of fixing these performance issues as well. However, calling metrics, labels, and values separately meant a few different things. And the biggest question we had was an important interaction question, which was, how do users currently use the metrics browser to kind of add to their query? Do they look metrics first, or do they look labels first? So right now, here, users can interact with this feature at any step they want. However, if we wanted to kind of have separate API calls for the metrics, labels, and values, we had to have a more opinionated kind of stepper flow to guide users through this. So we gathered qualitative and quantitative data to see how people searched. I learned that users actually searched by labels first and searched by metrics first equally. People would kind of search by labels when they weren't sure what the metric name was, but they knew that it was like in this cluster or in this job. And if people had some sort of idea of what the metric was, they would search by that first. So while there was kind of a parent-child relationship between the metrics, labels, and values, the way it's searched for isn't. And this I will come back to a bit later. So based off of this, I redesigned the metrics explorer with two different views. One where users can view by metrics first, and one where users can view by labels first. So in this metrics first view, you have a list of all of the metrics here. If you toggle into one, you see a list of the labels and then the associated values with it. And then in the view by labels first, it's kind of like a stepper kind of flow where basically there's a list of all of the labels on the left. If you toggle into one, you see values, and then if you select the values, then you see the metrics. Following that, I wanted to be able to perform some user testing to kind of gather some feedback around this, understand friction areas, points of confusion, as well as getting some design feedback. So basically with user testing, I had people basically perform a series of tasks and go through a design prototype where they would essentially try to select specific metrics, labels, and values. And there was quite a bit of confusion and difficulty when it comes to the navigation. So after observing 5 different users go through a prototype, what I learned was that users really struggle with the scrolling. So you can imagine, as I said before, there was like potentially millions of metrics or like hundreds and thousands of labels. And then within this view by metrics, users would have to do a lot of scrolling to get to what they want if they weren't sure what to search. So there's a lot of scrolling that could potentially happen. In the view by labels, you can only see 5 metrics at a time as well. So that for them was also challenging if they can imagine how many metrics they have. And a lot of this is also due to the fact that they were already kind of using the metrics browser where it's very dense. You can see a lot on the screen. Another thing that was confusing for users was that they found that the 2 different views, the nested tree and the steppers, to be confusing. So as you remember, like you have the metrics where it's like the nested tree, and then you have the labels, which is like that stepper. But for users, when they had to kind of navigate between the two, the change in UI and then the change in interaction patterns was very confusing for them, and they weren't sure why there was such a big difference. And some users also still didn't understand the relationship between metrics, labels, and values. So they mentioned that, hey, I'm not sure what I'll see in this dropdown when I'm kind of looking at this list of metrics. And when they clicked into it, they still weren't sure what these things were. So thinking about these kind of challenges that users had, we were kind of wondering, like, why were there kind of these problems? So thinking about this, one of the things we realized was that we were putting in so much content into the initial metrics explorer modal. So originally, this was designed to help people learn more about their metrics. So there was a lot of white space, there were tables, but we were putting in all of this additional functionality and really clashed with the original intent and the way the UI design is to really help people learn more about their metrics. So we were thinking maybe that should just be its sole purpose because everything else was just adding too much functionality into this pop-up. Also, the nested tree structure allowed for teaching opportunities. However, for the users, the main purpose was to really build a query as quickly as they can by finding the metrics, labels, and values as quickly as they could. So for them, like going through that nested tree structure was just friction points and getting to things quicker. So what did that mean? So it kind of means going back to the drawing board now. We're looking at ways to redesign the metrics browser instead, and I'm exploring some of those new designs. So maybe users would want to kind of view metrics separately from selecting labels and values. So here they could basically potentially open up a drawer by clicking on a button, and then they could see all of the metrics metadata in one part. They can kind of view it more slowly and have that completely separate from the metrics browser. Or maybe they just want to see the metrics metadata in line with all of the metrics within the metrics browser instead. So just having everything within the same view. To inform our decision, we're surveying our metrics explorer and metrics browser users to fully understand how valuable they're finding each feature. and how often they use it. We're also crowdsourcing their opinions to determine if there's one option that's clearly winning based off of how they're browsing for metrics and using that to inform our next steps as well. So in the end, there was a lot of collaboration across engineering UX, and we built out a great solution that solved for user needs. But now we're really thinking about what's best for Grafana, product and UX-wise. We're iterating, going back to the drawing board, and taking the time to think about, hey, we had this research, we had a good idea, and now reimagining it with the rest of the product. So this, again, is the before. This could potentially be the after, but we are still exploring. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. And does anyone have questions?
Awesome. I'm sure we have questions. Yes, all right. Any questions on this side? I can already start walking to you.
Hello, thank you for the talk. So I assume that this problem can be unsolvable if someone has like 10 million, 100 million of active time series. You just can't recognize them well. But have you considered following from the smaller to the bigger, like identifying those labels which have the lowest cardinality? So for example, even for 10 million active time series, someone can have metrics for prod and metrics for dev and metrics for staging, and show these lowest cardinality labels first, and that will go like a filter from the lowest cardinality to the higher cardinality. So user can pick, I want to see metrics for prod, then for job, I don't know, my cube job or something like that, and only after that you will show them the list of the metrics related to that.
So you're mentioning showing just like basically the cardinality within the labels themselves and having users be able to select from that?
Yes, like to make Grafana to explore the cardinality first and going from the smaller to the bigger.
Yeah, so right now it's not listed in that view, but that's an interesting idea that we'll explore.
Thanks.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I was always wondering while using this browser, can you have some feature like the most used globally metrics will be highlighted somehow with star, with something like that? And even if all the dashboards are using, like for example, one metric for monitor for memory, I think it will be useful to be visible somehow.
Do you mind? No. Oh, so currently we do have access to how many metrics are used within query history to possibly find that, but we have not considered that yet. But it is a good thought. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, we've definitely heard this feedback though from other users as well, seeing like even like, for example, like a query history or just a metrics history. So that's definitely something that we're considering within the roadmap.
Did you find that some label names might be context sensitive for an organization? Like they're maybe used in a particular way for a particular group of users, or was there no pattern there?
So we found that for users, like it really depended on kind of like where the labels were coming from to some extent, but that wasn't something that we were really testing within our prototypes, mostly because we were kind of just seeing if like users were kind of like exploring by metrics first, or users were exploring by labels first. But we didn't get any insight into whether or not like where those labels impacted like how they searched for them.
And later on, for additional research, we were interviewing expert users with Prometheus, and they did request things like that. The solutions we came up for that were that having the admin configure those labels and some sort of library that other people could reference. But we have not looked into actually creating that solution yet.
I have like a question. So first thing is like really cool to see the filter by type and stuff. But I feel like one of the like challenge that usually happens, maybe it's the next step from the Explorer, is like looking correlation between two different metrics that might have similar labels. That will be something like usually challenging as well, right? We have like two different metrics that actually can be connected by group by here and there, but it's kind of hard to know, like, how can I actually utilize this metric to get better visibility or no? Is that something that you were also like looking into exploring more on the Explorer, or maybe it's like different tools to help get that kind of like visibility on utilizing the metrics better?
So correlations between metrics by similar labels?
Yep, so the one labels have the, let's say, the instance type, it can be in some metrics, and the other metric also have instance type, for instance, and it would be really cool, right, if we can actually just, this label's actually connect to this one as well. You can actually get the same thing, and you build PromQL out of those.
That would be very interesting. We did not explore that. After you.
I said we would love to learn a bit more about just like your use case. Maybe we can chat after.
But the way the bitmaps work underneath, it should be pretty performant. Random side note.
In Prometheus world, the most metrics which was created by Prometheus have two labels, mandatory labels. It's job and instance. And have you considered using these labels, highlighting these labels in Metric Explorer, or using it putting it in front of during the Metric Explorer? For instance, you can just put job label in front of all the labels, and then a user can type the job he wants to search, and then after that he can explore other metrics which belong to this particular job.
This is very interesting. That it is to have some things known, like you mentioned, that their job and instance are used quite regularly. I think that we could research more into this and find those consistent labels used across organizations. And it kind of reminds me about what was mentioned earlier about having some labels that would be appropriate for many, many customers, and then others that are specific to some systems. Interesting. Thank you.
Make it quick.
One last. Hi. Do you see that there is a need for this kind of Explorer if you could have a ChatGPT-based alternative? I mean, would users prefer that, or do you still see a need for this approach?
This is a very interesting question. So our same team is doing the implementation with LLMs and with vector DBs and query history. And we have a project that we're working on for metric select based on using LLMs. And so while that project is still in development, eventually we will do some user testing to compare these, I imagine. Yeah. See the efficacy of them and how they help users. And so there's still research to be done. Like everything that comes from the Metrics Explorer comes directly from Prometheus, but then for the AI supported or the LLMs, there is the additional step. And so we're still researching and testing that, but we see a lot of promise in it.
Yeah, so for the LLM feature, we're focusing on the problem of users, like especially beginner users struggling with PromQL. So that's the first thing we're looking to tackle with AI. But adding in kind of like the ability for users to be able to select a metric could be a potential next step. But we have this right now, and then we also want to really focus on that like querying experience, just like with pure PromQL first with the LLMs.
All right. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well done.